Yes.
Thank you. Mr. BG, before we start, can you see and hear me?
And yes.
Mr. BG, you've received transfusions on 2 occasions. Firstly, when you were born in 1969. What's your understanding of what happened then?
To the best of my knowledge, I only basically know what my mother has told me. When I was born, I was very, very poorly as a child. From what my dad tells me, I was in hospital for over 3-4 months, really quite poorly with jaundice. This is only what my dad has told me. That's all I've got to rely on. And basically, that's all that I know.
And you understand from your mum and dad that at that time you had a transfusion?
That's correct, yes.
Then in December 1991, when you were about 22, you were involved in a serious road traffic accident.
That's correct, yes.
And you were bleeding heavily when you arrived at the hospital.
Yes.
And your recollection is that you received a blood transfusion on that occasion.
Yes, I did. I wasn't initially aware that I did have a blood transfusion. It wasn't up until talking to the consultant that he actually notified me that I had a blood transfusion.
And you were in hospital then for about 2 weeks with various injuries, including a head injury, broken collarbone, broken leg.
Yeah.
You were seen by the GP on a number of occasions, but in 2006, you had some blood tests done.
That's correct, yes.
And I just want to look at that record so that we've all seen what's written. It's WITN 5228002. Most of it is redacted because it's part of your medical records, but the bit we want to look at isn't, and it's at the bottom of the page. The entry. Thank you. The entry is dated the 9th of January 2006, and it says liver function test, report abnormal, no further action, source lab, file non-coded. The patient informed status was set to patient does not need to be informed at the time of import to System 1. Discuss alcohol intake next time. Thank you, Lawrence. What's your recollection of the discussion you had with the doctor in 2006 about abnormal liver function tests?
I wasn't actually aware of it. I've only actually discovered that on going through my medical records. At that point in time, I wasn't even aware that there was a problem with my liver. It was actually much later on that I was notified, and it was on 3 separate occasions on yearly basis as checkups that it come back with abnormal.
You've gone through your records, and exactly the same entry is found in 2009 and also early 2019.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
You were then taken into hospital in December 2019. What was the issue you had at that time?
It was like before COVID was about, and it was like COVID-like symptoms. I was rushed in. But when I was took in, one of the paramedics did ask me partner if she had noticed that I was looking awful yellow.
And you were noticed to be jaundiced, and you had lymphedema as well.
That's correct, yeah.
When you were in the hospital, you were tested for hepatitis C.
Yes.
And how were you told that you did indeed have hepatitis C?
I was actually informed by telephone, and it was actually at a later point in time that they did actually discuss it with me, but it was just a quick telephone conversation, and then they said they would have to see me.
And how did you feel about the way in which you were told?
I wasn't really happy about it because I knew nothing about hepatitis C or what it did or anything like that. And to actually inform me in that way, I think it would have been better to actually let me know a bit about what was actually going to actually happen to me.
And what's happened with your treatment since then?
Basically, I've just started seeing my consultant again because it's been over 2 years since I actually cleared the hepatitis C virus, and I had to actually contact my local MP to actually give me some help to see a consultant.
Just before we get to that more recent history, you had the phone call to say you had hepatitis C. You say in your statement it then took quite a long time until you actually got to see a consultant and start treatment and have a proper discussion. Is that right?
No, that was actually pretty quick. I'm referring to like from the point of the Hep C being cleared up to seeing a consultant, not with regards with what you're talking about.
Okay. So you had the treatment, and how did you find that?
I had to wait quite a long time because they told me that it had to go in front of a panel in Sheffield, and the treatment would cost £55,000, and unfortunately not everybody did get it. I was actually waiting for quite a long time to actually say whether I would get it or whether I wouldn't get the treatment.
And was the treatment successful in clearing the hepatitis C?
Yes, it did clear the hepatitis C, but it has left me with chronic liver disease.
And what have you been told about the situation with your liver?
The consultant I see says normally it would base it, normal doctors would base it on numbers, but he bases it as ABC, and he says the stage I am at is B, and he says I will need a liver transplant.
And you described just a moment ago difficulties then in having further follow-up. What can you tell us about what's happened?
I waited, once I'd cleared the hepatitis C virus, I waited nearly over 2 years, to actually get an appointment, and the only way I actually got the appointment was via my local MP.
You wrote to the MP and he said he would investigate?
That's correct. That was where I think it was one of your advisors that said I should try that, and it was very helpful, to be honest.
That was June 2022?
Yep.
And you then did get an appointment at the hospital?
Yep, I've had 2 appointments since, and further tests and things like that I never had done in the past.
Can you tell us, or what can you tell us about the impact mentally on your mental well-being of being diagnosed?
Well, firstly, there's my partner and my children. I were worrying about them all the time. If I'd infected them whilst not knowing about the infection and things like that. I did attempt suicide. I got myself in that much of a state where I just felt everything was hopeless and I was going to die anyway, so.
You were referred to mental health services when you were in the hospital, but since then you haven't had any real success in accessing any mental health services.
Not at all, no. None whatsoever. I do try and get my GP to refer me, but it's always about waiting lists and things like that.
Have you told anyone about your diagnosis?
Where I come from, village, and everybody knows everybody, and no, definitely not. It's not something that I'd even consider, to be honest with you, because of the stigma attached to it. You mentioned hepatitis. People just assume that it's HIV and all the bad things that are associated with that. And
you've since applied for financial assistance. You tried initially to apply to the English scheme.
that's correct, yeah.
And what were you told when you applied there?
Because the infection, one of them could have occurred in Scotland, they said that it was nothing to do with them and I would need to make a claim through the Scottish board.
And you've now made that application to the Scottish scheme, but you're waiting to hear.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to move now to some more thematic discussion with all of the panel. Mr. BG, please contribute, and we will hear your voice even though nobody can see you.
Okay.
I want to start by exploring some issues about the time it took from the transfusion to each of your diagnoses. Mrs. BF, you reflect in your statement about a lack of understanding of hepatitis C within the medical profession.
Yeah.
Would you like to say any more about your perception and what your view is of that?
What I want to come out of this inquiry is that doctors are trained to be much more aware of this disease because at least three GPs said to me, you know, this can't be. I spoke to one retired GP that nothing, it was just socially, but he said, almost said, no, you couldn't be hepatitis C positive because it's only through factor 8 that you can get it. And I thought, here we go, here's another one, you know. Sorry, I've lost the question now.
I was just asking for your view and perception of issues around lack of understanding within the medical profession.
Yes, I have found that even consultants, they say they can't answer questions like the IBS. When I spoke to he said, well, it could be, but he said, I don't know, you know more about it than I do. So I just really wish that there was a lot more awareness of this illness and the fact that there is now a cure and that it isn't, it's only spread through blood contact. It isn't spread in any other way, and so it hasn't quite got the fear context perhaps that HIV has got.
Wendy, Robert, Mr. BG, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Well, I didn't know for 38 years after, which is what, because obviously I didn't know that I had it, but I haven't got a lot of faith. That has, for me, my faith in doctors, really and truly. If I go to the doctors now and I ask, and I don't go away feeling confident.
And that's because
And that's because of this, yeah.
because
Definitely.
you'd been so many times before you were diagnosed.
Exactly.
Mr. BG, I think you were about to join the conversation.
I feel that it's lacking because my local GP totally refuses to talk about hepatitis C. He's got my medical notes sat in front of him. He never ever mentions it. It's always me that mentions it to him. And it's just as if he doesn't want to talk about it in any way.
Similar experience.
Sorry, could you just sit forward slightly?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Then we can pick up.
similar experience. As I mentioned earlier, I've never actually seen the GP because the original one swapped and then the next one swapped. And by the time I got to the third one, it was already after I'd spoken to Sam, and I said that I basically told them, I think I have hepatitis C. But once that was done and the referral letter was written, they don't really want anything to do with you. And like the other member talked about, there's no awareness. It's really shameful, actually. But I live in a small town, so it's possibly to be expected.
And Wendy, you've reflected that impacts your confidence in the GP in relation, and doctors generally.
Definitely.
Do others on the panel feel similarly, or have you not had that experience of it impacting your confidence in them?
Oh, it's definitely impacted my confidence, and I find exactly the same thing, that there's never any reference at all to hepatitis C. It's as if it's been there, it's gone, and that's it. We don't go there. Nothing else is going to be related to it whatsoever, and no, it's almost conspiracy of silence.
Mine's been a crash course in hepatitis C. You know, it's exactly a year ago this week that I talked to Samantha May. So I can't really comment very well about GPs. Generally, for me, they've been very receptive to what I've asked them to do, but knowledge, very poor.
And in terms of your current treatment pathways, I think a number of you were very positive about the nurse specialists and how important they were. I can see all four of you nodding. But I think you've all also had difficulties with the treatment pathways and access to clinicians, access to doctors. Do you have any reflections on why those pathways have been difficult?
I think there's often a breakdown of communication. All the way through my life, I can see in the NHS breakdowns in communication that bring about these anomalies, and the fact that, you know, so once the computer has said this is how it goes, nobody wants to argue with it, and nobody wants to look at what the information that's been inputted into that computer is. They just want to look at the output and say, well, sorry, this is it, this is how it is, go away and stop being a nuisance.
It's the way I feel. I feel the same.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about why and what your perception is?
Well, like I say, I just lost all faith in it. You know, I mean, where I live, if you go to the doctors, you never see the same doctor anyway. And if you want to talk about anything, they just sort of brush you off, you know, and say, it's gone, you've gone, and that's it.
So perhaps a perception that once the hepatitis C treatment is completed...
Exactly, they don't want to know.
It doesn't need to be addressed anymore.
Exactly,
No,
exactly.
it doesn't.
That's forgotten about.
And in terms of accessing and access to doctors and consultants when you were going through the treatment pathway, I think you all experienced difficulties. Wendy, did you have any reflections on why there were difficulties?
I just don't know. I had to go to Ipswich Hospital because they didn't deal with it in hospital, so I had to go there. But I mean, the nurse that I had there was marvellous. She was on the phone all the while and bring me up, see how I was getting on with the tablets, and sending me all the blood tests to go to. I mean, I could go to get the blood tests, but she'd have to send me all the files, and I can't thank her enough, you know. She was really, really brilliant.
Robert and Mr. BG. Mr. BG.
When I actually asked my local MP to look into it, I did ask for a detailed report of what the failings actually were, and they put that down to a lack of communication and a breakdown in communication, and that was the only support that they actually give to justify it.
Robert, do you have any reflections?
Hepatitis C for me was, like I said, it was very new. But the one thing that the nurse practitioner really, I think that's what they're called, really helped me with was about my children and my wife. Because having said, here's the bag of medicine, you need to really kind of make sure that things are separated because it's a bloodborne virus, right? So she was very helpful in writing a letter. Another case, I talked to her the other night about it. She thought that it was not really an issue. And I've talked to Sam about it in the past. Is it to do with money or is it to do with but just the questioning about why? Well, my dad was diagnosed with hepatitis C. Oh, well, you probably don't have it. There's a big thing.
But I think you're picking up there some concerns about the need for people to justify having the test
Yes.
when they're going to a GP and asking for it.
Yes.
And finally, in terms of the EIBSS applications, I think three of you have had a struggle. What are your views of the process you've had to follow?
When I initially put my forms into my local GP, they actually lost them, and it took them over 6 months to actually admit that they'd lost them, and then I had to get some more filled out and take them back to the consultant and that.
Yeah, we had that. We filled in the form wrong, or they filled the form in wrong. They filled the form in wrong, yeah. And so we had to go through all that process again.
Yeah, they don't make it easy at all.
Definitely.
I don't know. It's like with most things, you have to just prove you're not lying all the time. And you know, who would lie about having a virus such as hepatitis C? You know, you might get the odd one or two, but I mean, it's something that 40 years later you find out about, and that's a massive shock and a massive thing to go through anyway. And then you have to jump through hoops to fill in masses of forms to be told that you're lying, basically, and that she must have got it in another country somewhere. And you know, it's just a constant fight. It's a lot, and I didn't mind doing that because I thought it was important. But must be lots of other people who don't have the ability to do that and would receive the letter and just end it there.
Which I would have done because I wouldn't know where to start.
I think you've said that if Gemma hadn't picked this up for you,
oh, definitely,
you'd have just filed the letter and said, well, there we go.
I would have done because I definitely wouldn't know where to start.
The original application talks about, I think some of the people here have had access to their medical records, and despite some of them pieces being missing. But for me, the application form talks very clearly about you must apply for your medical records. As soon as you apply for your medical records and you get a rejection, I think that was within about the 2 or 3 days of sending the document to EBIS. I got the rejection, and I remember writing to Susan Stretch from the Hep C Trust saying, am I done? Because if you can't prove anything, like you said, it just gives you this feeling that you're lying. And why would you lie? There's no need to lie. But the then denial or rejection by the EBIS in my case, which was well publicized this morning, I think is quite ridiculous. So I did get the feeling that the auditors, if you want to call them that, are external from EBIS. I'm not sure. But when I spoke to the lady at the EBIS on Wednesday, she remembered my case. She remembered me not being a policeman or being a policeman. And so the process seems to have a conflict of interest from the beginning, because you're asked to provide your records, but your records are in trust with the NHS, but they destroy them. How? There must be many, many people in the same boat as me that had their documents destroyed. Or, yeah, I mean, they just flat out said, based on the 8-year rule, it's destroyed, gone.
Of course, Mrs. BF, you had your records, and with the records, the process was then straightforward.
Yes, I was just very lucky, I suppose, in that the Bristol Authority happened to keep my records, and the consultant was very keen for me to make the application, because originally I sort of thought I don't want to take money from the NHS, and then I was reassured that the NHS isn't going to see that money anyway, and you should go ahead and apply.
So those are the questions I have for the panel. Before I invite the panellists to say anything further they'd like to say, do you have any questions for them?
No, I don't, thank you.
Then, Mr. BG, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Robert, is there anything else you would like to add?
I'm like some of the other people here. I think Hep C awareness is really, really important. So in my case, I've joined together with the Hep C Trust to do more of that, and eventually end up on the helpline for the Hep C Trust. So I want to thank the inquiry for doing what they're doing, and I really appreciate and hope that the final report will help not just me but other people. Thank you for all the work.
Wendy?
No.
Gemma?
I don't think, I mean, I might just want to add one little bit about the doctor's records. It seems in our case that initially even asking for the medical records of Mum was deemed, well, why do you want those? We're not giving you those. And they're her medical records. And that was the initial fight. So I knew it was going to be difficult from that process, but I just wish, you know, it's not as if I'm asking for anyone's records, I'm asking for your own kind of thing. I just wish it was made a bit easier for people who are going through something like this that's shocking in the first instance anyway. You should be helped, not hindered, basically.
Mrs. BF, is there anything else you'd like
I just want to thank the inquiry for the amazing work that it's done, and how it's raised the profile, and how it's actually managing to get us all compensation and make things, you know, as well as they can be.
Sir?
Well, I wish that it had made awareness even greater. The accounts which you've given, or all of you, show that there's still quite a lot of work to be done. You in particular, Mrs. BE, have said that what you want to come out of this inquiry is doctors to be more aware
Absolutely.
Of the disease. Yeah. Can I thank you for, as it were, bringing us right up to date, bang up to date pretty much, because your infections in each case, except I think for yours, arose, or were identified, I should say, for the first time during the course of this inquiry. And in your case, firstly in the UK,
Yes.
in the course of this inquiry. So it's very recent, and our terms of reference take us from the start of the NHS right up to today. And so it shows that there may yet be matters for me to consider at the end. But I want to thank each of you. The fact, I often say it, and sometimes people When you repeat things, they lose their force. But it's not easy giving evidence. The fact that two of you have chosen to be anonymous, but have still given evidence, is a testament to you and your desire to help others. I've noted that in, I think, each of your cases, one of the worries you've had is not so much a worry for yourself, having been told of the infection, though it was, but for others whom you might have infected inadvertently along the way. That shows the spirit, the public spirit, which you have also shown by being here on this panel. So I think you deserve our full appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to say something. So if you don't mind, each of you, this doesn't apply to Mr. BG, who is obviously somewhere else, but if you just stay there for the moment. What I want to say to you is this. We've reached another significant milestone for this inquiry. Today's evidence is the last oral evidence that we're timetabled to hear about what happened and why, with the exception, that is, of the 2 days next week that necessarily had to be rescheduled for the late Queen's funeral. I promised at the outset that this inquiry would begin and end its oral evidence about what happened and why with the testimony of people infected and affected. That promise has been honoured, save for the rescheduled 2 days. In my view, that has proved to be the right thing to do for this inquiry. And indeed, no one who's heard the evidence could fail to appreciate the importance of what we've heard, to understand the order in which we've heard it, and to see the significance of beginning and ending with the personal accounts, the very personal accounts, we have heard. During the course of the inquiry, 230 people who have been infected or affected have given evidence in person, and some, roughly 3,500 people, have given written statements or spoken to the inquiry's intermediaries. Let me say something to each of you who has given evidence, whether oral or written, or contributed their perspective through intermediaries. And I include those whose voices have been heard here through those who have survived them. I'd like to recognize you and them all for the contributions, and to thank those who have enabled them to be made. Each of you has helped to place another piece in the jigsaw puzzle about what happened and why. Sometimes with testimony that has cast light where no other documents or witnesses are available, and often by providing depth and definition on experiences common to far too many families across the length and breadth of each of the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. This evidence cannot have been easy to give. I'm very grateful to all of you who have given evidence, and the way in which your, and I mean the people here, your individual and collective support has made it so much easier for so many to give evidence so effectively. Let me also say this. At the outset, I said I intended this inquiry would be one in which all witnesses will be treated with respect. I'd like to pay tribute to you and to all those who have sat listening in the hearing room, not only to evidence which you may have endorsed, but to evidence which you may have found uncomfortable or challenging, for the way in which you have enabled each witness to give the best evidence they felt able to give. In short, not just for the support, so valuable, which you've given to so many, but the respect and sometimes restraint which you've shown throughout to all. The task I'm challenged with is not an easy one, but my goodness, you have made it easier. Thank you. In November, we'll turn our attention to possible recommendations with witnesses. I think
Thank you.
you can sit down. Turn our attention to possible recommendations with witnesses on topics such as what more can be done to find people infected and as yet undiagnosed. You'll appreciate that there are quite a number of witnesses to schedule, and we'll publish the timetable in the inquiry website next week. In the meantime, we meet again on Thursday next week for the evidence of Professor Tedder, rescheduled as it has been from the late Queen's funeral. So it's Thursday at 10 a.m. Thank you once again.